Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of Cúilín Media. I am Liam White, the Faithful Podcast, joined here tonight by Aaron Prendergast from Gaelic Games Fan TV, and of course, Matthew Hurley, the man behind the Gaelic Statsman channel. Seamus tonight is off on his adventures, so we are without him tonight. Hopefully, he's alive and well, and hopefully, we'll have him back for the episode on Sunday evening. But I suppose, lads, here we are. It's cold, it's damp, and it's December, but yet we still have games to look forward to this weekend. Matthew, I'll come to you first. All-Ireland semi-finals this weekend in the Senior Championship. A chance to go to Croke Park next month and potentially make history for your club. Looking forward to the games this weekend. And I suppose, first of all, as well, have you got all the presents sorted for Christmas?
I'll go to the second question first, Liam. No. I'm absolutely no. I'm terrible on that, to be honest. This year, just all stuff getting in the way, like work and stuff like that. Hopefully, over the weekend now, there's less Gaelic games action, and I could just go out into the city or whatever and just buy some gifts. Even though it's the 20th and 21st of December, so it's lastminute.com. But there you go. But anyway, look at the games this weekend. Yeah, it's an opportunity for many clubs to make history more ways than one. I suppose St. Martin's have never won an All-Ireland or even get to an All-Ireland final. For one thing, Ballygunner are hoping to win their second in a few years, second with this crop of players. Slaughtneil hoping to be the first Derry club to ever reach an All-Ireland final, which will be some feat, and they've been at it for so many seasons now. Loughrea hoping to reach their first All-Ireland final since I think 06 or 07. So it is going to be an interesting weekend in terms of that. Imagine if it's a Slaughtneil St. Martin's final, a novel final, like that would be absolutely incredible. I know we had a novel final last year, but that would be sensational in its own right. And obviously there's eyes on the intermediate and junior as well. The junior, obviously covering Kilbrittain throughout the year more than anything. So I'll have eyes on the junior on Saturday. They play David Suncourt Cuddy from Wexford. So really looking forward to that game as well. So yeah, not a lot of action to look forward to. There's only 6 games, but I suppose they are important games to look forward to. And yeah, we're 5 days, what is it, 4 days off Christmas, and we still have action. It's unbelievable, really. And look, we couldn't have a bet any other way, really, lads.
No, absolutely. We have a cracking weekend to look forward to. Aaron, I suppose, yeah, the football will be taking the centre stage after Christmas. The hurling is happening before Christmas. I suppose if you were from one of those clubs that are competing in the All-Ireland semi-final, either code, or obviously you have the camogie at the moment, which is going to a replay.
Should we guess what he was going to say?
Yeah, sure, as they work away.
Yeah, it's not a bad image to freeze on, I suppose. I don't know if he's going to cut back in there, but yeah, no, look, I like to take over what he's saying. I don't know what the question was going to be exactly, but yeah, no, look, looking forward to the weekend's games. There's no question about it. It is weird having two All-Ireland hurling semi-finals before Christmas, and I know we've kind of mentioned it before. It does seem quite unfair on those players, and look, it feels unfair on the junior games and the intermediate games and everything else that's happening this weekend. But look, from a viewing perspective, we've got 2 cracking games. Loughrea Slaughtneil is on the doorstep as well. It's only up the road in Parnell Park, so I might go down and watch it, to be fair. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's definitely. I think both games are kind of set up nicely, in terms of Loughrea, Slaughtneil. I think if we had Slaughtneil and Ballygunner this weekend, let's say, I think you could see a one-sided game there. You could see one team kind of being very, very dominant over the other. But look, I think Loughrea Slaughtneil, I think, is very evenly balanced. In my opinion. Loughrea, you go with certainly as the favourites. But I think Slaughtneil have proved before in the past. And look, we saw Galway clubs lose to Ulster clubs very recently, a couple of years ago, and we remember what Dunloy did. So Slaughtneil will definitely be in the conversation. And yeah, good to have the games back, and look, good to have Liam back there as well now. Or maybe not.
Jeez.
Can you hear me now?
I think so.
My God, this is what happens when you live in the bloody Midlands. Terrible Wi-Fi. Right. Well, I have no idea what you said, but I'm glad you said it. Anyway. Well, look, before this goes to disaster again, we'll crack on with the games that are happening this weekend. But before that, we're going to look at a couple of things because we have a couple of comments that are flying in at the moment. So I suppose looking at this comment, first of all, by Peter Griffin. Peter says, hey lads, best wishes to Paddy McBrearty on his retirement, one of Jimmy O's from 2012. Famously played minor and senior on the same day in Ulster. Unfortunately, injury makes the tough call. I suppose, Matthew, I'll come to you first with this one. Paddy McBrearty retiring from intercounty football. It's a real shame. He has a wand of a left foot. He's been one of Donegal's finest ever footballers, and he's going to be sorely missed in the green and gold jersey.
Yeah, what a player for Donegal in the past. And yeah, he was a fantastic player, maybe underrated in some quarters by many people. A lot of people would have talked about in that team, Carl Lacey, Michael Murphy, Colin McFadden. But it's worth noting, Paddy McBrearty was still only, 18, 19 years of age under Jimmy that time. He was a sensational footballer. Like, I can remember him playing against my own county, Cork, in Croke Park. He scored 9 points in an All-Ireland preliminary quarter-final, and he was absolutely sensational that day. I think we put 2 men on him. We put Thomas Clancy first, and then Owen Cadigan, and I think another player after that, and they just couldn't live with Paddy McBrearty. He was just absolutely sensational throughout his career, more than anything for Donegal. Donegal legend, I think it is certified now. He's won the most Ulster titles individually for a Donegal player, which is a fantastic achievement. A lot of people might think Michael Murphy, but McBrearty holds that honour with, I think, 7. So, yeah, he was a fantastic player for Donegal and for his club, Kilcar, as well. Obviously, injuries did take over. Like, it was a difficult time for him. And he was only 32 as well, which is quite unfortunate that he ended his career so early on, I suppose. 167 appearances for Donegal, 82 championship appearances, scored 8 goals and 176 in the championship. And then in 2016 and 2019 was his highest tally. So, like, he was absolutely brilliant in fairness in a Donegal jersey. Won an All-Ireland, obviously, in 2012 as well, under Jimmy. And yeah, he was a fantastic footballer and probably one of the greatest of our generation, I would say, in terms of forwards, in terms of brilliant Donegal forwards and things like that. So yeah, he was a sensational footballer, and it's just a shame that he did have to retire so early.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's genuinely been one of my favourite footballers to watch from the Donegal team over the years. Certainly a player that might have the same, probably maybe in a way won't have the same legacy maybe as Michael Murphy potentially, but at the same time has done so much for Donegal football, won multiple Ulster titles, and yeah, he's just an absolute wand of a left foot. So the very best of luck to him on his retirement. Aaron, if you want to give a quick word to him, and as well as this man as well, Niall Kelly is retiring too from Kildare after, I would say, over a 10-year period. A great career for him. Obviously, very good tie player as well. But yeah, a couple of retirements this week with 2 very good players.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like the Paddy McBrearty one, I think surprised me a little bit, to be honest. I know he has had injuries and he's been around the block for a good, for a long time. And Matthew obviously ran through with scoring prowess there, and he won I think 5 Ulster titles or something like that in total. So he's an incredible football player. There's no question about that. Didn't play as much last season. He was kind of rotated between him and Ushie and Gallen in terms of that kind of 15 position. Made an impact a couple of times off the bench, but was a little bit surprised just given the fact that, look, Michael Murphy's probably given it one more year. There is young players coming through Donegal, there's no question about that, but at the same time, I do think Jim McGuinness and this Donegal team, they want to make the most out of some of the older players and probably give it one more push, one more kind of big year. I don't necessarily think McGuinness is going to be around for the long haul, to be honest with you. Like, I could see him giving it maybe 1 or 2 more years. And I think, look, Kerry are probably the All-Ireland favourites next year, but I think Donegal have a chance. And look, maybe it is injuries. Maybe he just didn't want to be an impact player. Maybe he just wants to play football. And if he's not going to be guaranteed a starter, then maybe he's going to look elsewhere. But yeah, I would have thought to have him as an option just to come off the bench like last season would have been huge for Donegal again this year. And that could be maybe the difference in a big game when you're looking for something. But look, ultimately it's his decision. He owes nothing to nobody. He's been around the block a long time. And with injuries and everything else, you can understand it. And then Niall Kelly, brilliant Kildare footballer, probably one of the more underrated players, I think, when it comes to Kildare and a tie and everything else. you know, and look, we saw some of the quality with a tie this season, in fairness. And yeah, he's going to be, you know, a miss for Kildare. But look, I'd imagine he'll be sticking around with a tie for a while. And you know, that'll be great for them, you know, going into next season.
Absolutely, it will. Just flying through some of the comments, it's great to see Peter Griffin in here as he is every single week. Good to see you, Peter, throwing in the comments. A couple of interesting ones there regarding some of the meetings that were being held during the week between the GDA, the Camogie Association and the LGFA in the Oireachtas, looking at potential integration into the future and looking at the spending that was done by certain counties over the year as well, reading there Galway 2.3 million and all that. And I know after GDA spent a lot of money, and I can imagine Cork and Dublin have probably spent a lot of money. I suppose, Matthew, looking at from an integration perspective, can we see this happening potentially over the next couple of years? And in terms of spending from a county setup perspective, I mean, it's an amateur sport, but it's so professionally run now that when you read these types of figures in the millions or whatever, it's absolutely insane.
It is, to be fair, and yeah, it's hard to see kind of an integration in probably the next while, in all honesty, because I had this discussion with Seamus about a few years ago about sit-down protests and things like that. I remember those in 2023, like they were big kind of news stories back then, and we're thinking, when is like this was planned during COVID initially in 2020. And then 3 years later, there was the sit-down protests. And then like 2 years later, obviously, nothing's really, well, they're edging towards an integration. But at the same time, there still isn't concrete evidence that this is going to happen. And I suppose another key story this week was the AFLW players moving down. Like I'd love to know what is keeping the men's players, for example, the brilliant men's players around the island of Ireland, and then the LGFA players leave. Like the big LGFA players, I'm talking the likes of Vicky Wall, Amy Mackin down through the years. Obviously, recently enough, Sarah Wall from Meath, like Aoife Horst, like these are big players in the LGFA. And I'd wonder, why are they stepping away from the game in LGFA at inter-county level? Whereas when you look at the men's game, the likes of David Clifford, the likes of Con O'Callaghan, the likes of these brilliant players are still sticking around. They're not they're not enticed by any contracts down under. So I'd wonder what is kind of the differentiation there. But yeah, the sooner it does happen, the better. Like there's been stories even with the ladies' games over the week, like even not just the AFLW, even Big Hoppinger, who was a brilliant dual player down through the years. She's confirmed in the last week to Ciara McCarthy for the Southern Star that she won't be doing dual next year. She'll be only concentrating on camogie. She didn't want to make that decision, but she was kind of forced into the hand because like, the LGFA and the Camogie Association just wouldn't work together in terms of organising fixtures. What an integration would do in those instances then, because you look at the hurling and the football, they're kind of evenly spread out per county. Like Cork footballers play one weekend, Cork hurlers play another weekend, and it's just common sense coming across the board. With the Camogie Association and the LGFA, it's not the same. They're different organisations. Sometimes you have Cork LGFA teams and Cork Camogie teams playing on the same weekend, and then the dual player ultimately is irrelevant after that. Obviously, Libby didn't want it to come to that situation, but I'd wonder, like, from the AFLW standpoint, will the LGFA players be enticed to stay on the island more? And from a dual standpoint as well, will the Camogie Association and the LGFA actually work together and actually come up with a contingency plan in terms of fixtures and have them at separate times to suit the needs of the players and things like that? Because it certainly wasn't the case with no integration as we have now. I hope it does come in the next few years. I'm really hoping it does. I wouldn't be holding my breath considering this has been planned back in 2020. That's 5-6 years ago at this stage. Will it be planned in the near future? I'm not sure. Like, I think it needs to be planned either next year, 2027 at the very minimum. If it doesn't get planned for then like if it's 2028, like that's a too long gap. That's 8 years, Liam. Let's be honest. That's way too long. So yeah, the sooner it does happen, the better. Looking at how it has developed though, I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Yeah, it's really hard to know at the moment, and it's probably something that I can't really see happening over the next couple of years, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of work and there's a lot of discussions that need to be held and a lot of people that be trying to get on the right side of each other. And like you mentioned there, especially with putting games on the same weekends that involve LGFA players and Camogie players having to choose between one or the other. Like, that's not fair. Like you mentioned there, in club championships and in inter-county championships as well, you have your examples, your Corks, your Dublins, your Offaly's, just with the three of us on here. They'll all be playing on separate weekends. They'll all be playing on different weekends, different venues, and it's all, it's all made in the right way. Whereas with the camogie and LGFA, a lot of time it just feels like it's all up in the air. So look, hopefully over the next couple of years, or just soon anyways, they can come to some kind of an agreement, and maybe this can be integrated together, because at the end of the day, we're all one community. At the end of the day, we're all Gaelic Games, and that's the way it should be seen. I suppose, looking at this comment I found interesting from Peter Griffin, again, I'm going to put this one to you, Aaron. Another talking point this week was from Martin Brettany, suggesting the Galway hurling champions enter either the Munster or Leinster club knockouts. Now, obviously, us being Leinster hurling supporters, we've gotten used to Galway being in the Leinster Championship over the last couple of years, because obviously they're not going to be forced to play against the likes of Roscommon, Mayo, Sligo. They're just not up to that level at the moment. It'd be unfair kind of every single year. But in terms of the club championship, we know that obviously someone like Loughrea, they win the Galway championship, they're straight into an All-Ireland semi-final, whereas you get someone from Dublin, from Offaly, from Cork, whatever, they have to go through their respective provincial championships. Can you see a possibility where a Loughrea or St. Thomas's, whatever, could be competing in a Munster, Ulster, Leinster club championship anytime soon?
I think it could happen. I think St. Thomas winning the All Ireland a couple of years ago, though, probably maybe curtails that a little bit. Because look, they were in that same boat, and they managed to get over the line. They proved it was possible. But at the same time, look, we saw what happened to them when they played Dunloy a year previously, where they were caught kind of cold on that particular occasion. It definitely is a possibility. I think it would be one of them, though, where, I think the issue you would then have is you're going to have one provincial winner go straight through to an All-Ireland final, and then you're going to have the other two provinces battle it out in that kind of aspect in a semi-final position. So that could potentially become an issue in terms of how you manage that. I know you could do Leinster versus Ulster one year with Munster going into the final and then kind of rotate it. But yeah, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to see how Turin get on this weekend in the Intermediate Hurling Championship, because I think they're, that we could have something potentially there. We could have something brewing maybe in a Connacht Hurling Championship. I'd definitely like to see them trial it. Look, even if they did it next year and Galway beat them by 30 points, do it again. Run it. Don't just give it one game. Do a trial over maybe a 3-year period, and then we can kind of see maybe how that kind of holds up. And I know it's only an extra game. It's only one extra game. But yeah, I don't really know, to be honest with you, because I think the Leinster Club Hurling Championship is competitive enough and good enough as it is. I think the Munster Club Hurling Championship is very good as it is. Do you need someone else in there, and then you're spoiling? You're going to have a weekend with one semi-final. Yeah, I don't really know how they'd manage it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting debate. Anyways, I, for one, I'd say keep them away, because we don't need more competition in Leinster than there is already, to be honest with you. And that's not me being salty that we lost in the quarterfinals. But no, it is an interesting topic anyways, and one to certainly come back to over the next couple of years, unless you can get someone like a Turin who are making great strides in the club hurling circles to maybe go to an extra level over the next couple of years. But we'll just have to wait and see. Well, I suppose now we may as well get into the games that are happening this weekend, and we're going to be starting off with the game between Ballygunner and St. Martin's, picked out as potentially and possibly, I would say, the game of the weekend. And our good buddy, Mr. Seamus Brady, he is alive, he is well, and he's thrown in the comment. Love to see it, Seamus. Hope you're well. Well, lads, apologies I can't make this one. Who's your player picked to be the key difference maker this weekend? I suppose we'll look at it first of all from a Ballygunner versus St. Martin's perspective. Matthew, I'll come to you first. Obviously, we know the talents of both these teams. We know the real standout players. For Ballygunner, of course, you have Desi Hutchinson, you have Pádraig Mahoney, you have Kevin Mahoney, Patrick Fitzgerald, you have Harry Ruddle, who's really come onto the scene this season particularly. For you, who's the biggest difference maker from a Ballygunner perspective?
To me, I think Peter Hogan probably is this season, and a lot of people point towards Desi Hutchinson being absolutely sensational. In fairness, we'll bring up the scoring tallies in a sec. He's absolutely sensational throughout the whole season. But I think Peter Hogan, around the middle of the park, he's probably influence on games, the way he sets up scores, the way he gets involved in rucks. As well as that, he's scored a lot from play, I think. I think he's been very, very good, and he's been probably the difference maker. He's the guy that kind of makes Ballygunner tick. And obviously, SARS came up against him in the Munster semi-final. Obviously, Ballygunner were the better team on the day. But he was sensational, really. I thought he was controlling the tempo of the game in many ways. And he was in many other games as well. The likes of the Pearship game, the likes of the Aero game. And yeah, I think he'd be an absolute huge player as well. I think Philip Manny, the thing is, like, if you punt balls long into the throat of Philip Manny, he's going to claim him all day, every day. He's a very good centre back. Stephen O'Keefe as well, the way he kind of uses his possession very, very well. I think he's definitely a difference maker in many ways. I think Harry Ruddle, I agree with you, Liam. I think he's been very good from wing back. Probably the most improved player from a Ballygunner point of view this season. Kevin Manny, always underrated. Patrick Fitzgerald as well, is capable of a few scores here and there. And I think a difference maker in terms of maybe a different way, probably Pádraig Manny if he is fit, because Ballygunner have a free taker that you know is going to get 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 every single game. Whereas some other club teams may not have that. I know that Martins have Rory O'Connor and Jack O'Connor, and they are very good free takers in their own right. But I think with Pádraig Manny, he's a huge difference maker for Ballygunner in terms of his free taking. But to pick one difference maker from a Ballygunner point of view, I'd have to go for Peter Hogan, considering his performances this season and the way he kind of dictates the play for Ballygunner.
Absolutely. He's had an unbelievable season. We're going to pull up the scores from the Ballygunner perspective, first of all, just focusing on them. And it's fair to say they've had their good range of scores this season, none more so than Mr. Hutchinson himself. I suppose, Aaron, 970 in the championship is just absolutely outrageous scoring. And when you look at it, only 27 frees overall, the 26 frees plus the 165. So overall, he has still scored 9 goals, and correct me if I'm wrong with the maths, and 43 points from play across the entire championship, which is just absolutely incredible. You've Pádraig Mahoney, who's got 34 points this season, 7 points from play. Peter Hogan, as Matthew was mentioning, 2 goals and 22 points, all coming from play. Kevin Mahoney, 2 goals and 21 points from play. Patrick Fitzgerald, 318, etc., etc. Like, those are some outrageous scores to be getting in the championship. We talked about St. Finbarr's firepower last weekend in the Camogie Championship, and then you look at Ballygunner scores, it's equally as impressive, and especially with the score lines that they've been putting up over the last couple of games as well in the Munster Championship.
Yeah, it is, and especially with Desi Hutchinson, he's been a freak of nature really for Ballygunner, and really over the last couple of years he's been extraordinary. Like I've said it before, I think he does get a lot of praise and everything else, but I think his skillfulness on the ball and the way he moves on the ball, the way he can beat players and just create that little shade of space that other players can't find, I think for me is what makes him on his day one of the best forwards in the country. We probably haven't seen that with Waterford maybe over the last couple of years for whatever reason, but when he has that Ballygunner shirt on, he's next level, and he's unmarkable on his day. Owen Cuddihy, scoring 417 from play, probably not a player that maybe gets mentioned in, I think we look at Desi Hutchinson, we look at Pat Fitzgerald, we look at Pádraig Mahoney, Matthews mentioned Peter Hogan. Owen Cuddihy doesn't really get put in that same bracket as well, but yeah, he scored 417 from play, 425 overall. I'd agree with that comment as well from Peter. I think Stephen O'Keefe's been excellent as well, on his puck outs. He's been absolutely brilliant. In particular, against SARS, I thought he was outstanding that day. In terms of his puck out. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's hard to see against Ballygunner. I know we'll get on to St. Martin's now. But with the form that Martins are coming in, I think that's what makes this really, really interesting.
Absolutely, it does. No, you look at some of the talent on the Ballygunner team, but then you look at the score lines of some of their games, Matthew, more than anything. Now, it is important with a bit of context, and look, I would be a strong advocate for this. I don't think the Waterford Championship is that strong. I've seen a couple of games from it. I don't think it's a great championship, and I could be well off saying that, considering, look, I didn't watch every single game in it, whatever. But you do look at the dominance from Ballygunner, and really the only game that they looked vulnerable enough in was in the semi-final, where De La Salle nearly pulled off what probably would have been the biggest shock in the country had they knocked him out in the semi-final. But then you look at the final, 235 in a county final over Mount Sion, 227 over Passage, 324, 327. Like, these are huge scorelines to be getting in your own respective club championship. But then they went into the Munster Championship, obviously very, very much were ran very close by the Piercing in the Gaelic grounds. Obviously beat Sarsfields in the semi-final, where pretty much took care of business against Aero without much of a fuss. Like, they've scored 262 points and 23 goals. They're averaging 224 a game. They're doubling their average between scoring and conceding in every single game. But it probably hasn't helped them with the Waterford Championship. But then you look at them in the Munster Championship, they've played 3 very, very good teams, well-capable teams, and really, they've looked really, really strong.
They have, in fairness, and I suppose when you look at their whole journey to the final, they've had only 4 games that the winning margin have been under 10 points. The game you mentioned, the Waterford Championship game against De La Salle, and 3 Munster games. And let's be honest, I think out of those games, I think the De La Salle game, the thing was, and context is very, very important here, Patrick Fitzgerald got sent off in the first half. So Ballygunner were actually down to 14 players. So maybe it was a disappointment for De La Salle not to put them away that day, because that was a major opportunity to do so. So when you think about it, when going through all that, the only 2 sides to put it up to them at stage is the Piercing, definitely in the Gaelic grounds, and having home advantage in the Gaelic grounds definitely helped the Piercing that time. And at stage, it's the Sars game. Like, Daniel Hogan scores a couple of goals, could have gone either way then, and then obviously Ballygunner get a few goals down the home stretch to make it comfortable enough in the end. But like, Sars and the Piercing were the only real 2 teams in the last few years to really put it up to Ballygunner when you think about it. A weird enough stat when you think about it as well. In the last 3 years in Championship Hurling, Ballygunner have only been beaten by 1 team after normal time, not counting penalties or anything like that. Against Sars last year, where Shane O'Regan scores 2-3. Like it or not, that's a ridiculous record. I know the Waterford Championship isn't the most competitive, and I will admit that it isn't great standard at all when you look at it. Like, Ballygunner's B team won the 2nd year of the Waterford Championship, which is a story for obviously that we discussed in length on the podcast previously. But like, Ballygunner's dominance in the Waterford Championship is just second to none. You look at the scorelines that they have been putting up. Like, even the second day out, they beat Bricky Rangers. Bricky Rangers only scored 8 points. Like, they didn't concede a goal in their first 5 games of the Waterford Championship. Like I don't know, does that come down genuinely to how strong Ballygunner's defence is, or does it come down to the poor quality in the Waterford Hurling Championship? Probably, maybe a bit of both. There. But the thing is, like, in their next 6 games after those first 5 games, they've only kept a clean sheet in one of those games against the Piercing. And that was a game where the Piercing really misfired in terms of their shooting and all that. So could it be maybe pathway to victory for Martins? I know we'll get on to Martins in the sec, but their goal scoring, that'll be utterly key. Like, if Rory O'Connor hits the back of the net in the first 2 minutes, could Ballygunner start to wobble a small bit? We'll have to see what does happen. But the record's absolutely sensational. It does speak for itself. Like, a 15-point winning margin is absolutely sensational in its own right. But you are right, Liam, in many ways. The Waterford Championship isn't the best quality. And like, can Martins put it up to them for the very off? I think they can, but we'll have to see what happens.
Absolutely. And I suppose moving on to St. Martin's from their perspective, and I'll go to you, Aaron, as someone who would have been well aware of St. Martin's over the last 2 years, having played Nafina for the last 2 years in a row, beating them this season, losing to them last year in Parnell Park. You look at the scores that they have: Rory O'Connor, a goal and 78 points this season, and you take away the frees and the 65s, whatever, he's still got 19 points from play this year. Jack O'Connor, 4 goals and 31 points, was man of the match in the Leinster final last day. Really stood up for his team when they needed him most. Barry O'Connor, 317, Mikey Coleman, 414, both coming from play. Like, that's 731 from play from 2 different players, which is absolutely incredible. You've Darren Codd, 217, who I think's had a really good season. Even Diarmuid O'Leary, who's normally a defender, scoring 4 points as well, chipping in, etc. and etc. The scorelines go on. But they have their own firepower themselves. And I suppose one thing that probably has helped them when you look at their championship, their pathways to the championship, the Wexford Championship would be probably more competitive than the Waterford Championship, I would say. And that's probably evidenced by some of the scorelines in some of their games. I mean, beating Chemaliers by 5 points, Glen Barntown 6 points. You know, Rapparees beating them by four points in the end. Ratnure St. Anne's 4 points in the county final, etc. So they've probably had it a lot tougher in the Wexford Championship, and then going through the Leinster Championship. I mean, to beat the All-Ireland champions on your own home turf, and especially after losing to them last year, to dispatch Naas the way that they did, a very good Naas team as well, who've been on the up for the last couple of years, and then to take down the ultimate, I would call them, final boss in Ballyhale Shamrocks, in Croke Park especially, in a first ever Leinster final. They've averaged 218 this season, 18 goals and 213 points across the season. They're averaging conceding a goal and 14 points. They can absolutely hurt Ballygunner this weekend. And having had those games, those real competitive games, it'll really stand to them.
Absolutely, it will be. Yeah, like I mean, the momentum that they're coming in with is huge. And the O'Connors have been like outrageous this year. And even Barry O'Connor that you were mentioning there as well, like scoring 317. But yeah, like I think what's improved mainly is they've a lot more firepower now across the pitch. I don't think they're just because even watch them, maybe not necessarily last season against Nafina, but in previous kind of big games and everything else. Like, yeah, there was that big gap in Wexford where they kind of had the championship a little bit earlier, but it did seem like there was maybe a bit of an over-reliance on the O'Connors a little bit. But I think this year you're seeing a lot more. I think Darren Codd has been very underrated this season. We mentioned like Peter Hogan being the man who kind of ticks Ballygunner. I think he's nearly been kind of the same player in many ways. And then you've Luke Kavanagh, who's been very impressive as well. So a lot of kind of scoring like firepower across the pitch, and like to take down Nafina the way that they did, they haven't showed anyone too much respect. Do you know what I mean? Like they've come for teams, they've been after teams, they've been pressing high. They've been aggressive in the tackle and winning the ball back. And it was the same as well against Ballyhale. And even like physically and in terms of like, fitness and everything like that, like they're more than a match for these teams, if not even better. So it will be interesting. Look, they've had a lot of intense games before this Ballygunner game. Ballygunner would probably, as we know, a lot more used to these kind of matches and everything else. Martins have been on an incredible run. You feel like if this game is in the balance, the Gunners probably would have a little bit more being able to shade it. But look, if St. Martin's can get a run on Ballygunner, and if they can catch them on an off day, there's definitely a chance there, and there's definitely an opportunity. So, I think it will make it a very, very interesting game.
Of course, I decided to cough the moment I meant to go to speak, but I think it is something that will. Jesus Christ. I think it is something that it will. Huh?
It's not going well today.
Jesus, who let me be a host? But no, I think it is something that probably will stand to them. I think you're absolutely right. Like you look at the games that they've had, like Nafina and Ballyhale. Nafina team who won the All-Ireland last year, they're 3 in a row now in Dublin. Ballyhale, we know the talent that they have. We know the pedigree that they have as well. And yet they went out and they showed absolutely no fear against them. They weren't startled by Croke Park or anything like that. And I suppose, Aaron, just from this perspective, they're the underdogs this weekend. And a lot of the time, St. Martin's this season have nearly been underdogs, I feel, in every game, probably bar Naas since winning the Wexford Championship. And it's nearly suited them down to the ground. And it might very well suit them again this weekend.
100%, yeah. Like they've kind of relished that underdog tag. Do you know what I mean? Like they've very much kind of embraced it and everything else. And like a lot of people written them off against Nafina. I thought Nafina would have enough and kind of come back and everything else after narrowly coming through Luke and Sarsfields when they weren't great in that game either, Nafina. But I thought, they kind of learned their lesson and they kind of be back on it. But no, they've been outstanding. They've been really, really strong. And I don't think you would say any of the games have been fluky wins or, like anything kind of that nature. Like I think even like against Nafina, they probably could have won that game by more. Against Ballyhale, like it was neck and neck in different stages, but I think St. Martin's, were by far the better side. And same against Naas as well. I think matchup wise, it's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how Martins can try and curtail Stephen O'Keefe's influence from puckouts. How do you stop Desi Hutchinson at the same time? How do Ballygunner stop the O'Connors? So I think the main thing, like we'd hope for, obviously with it being wintry conditions and everything else, we get the game that this deserves. Because I think if this is played in summery conditions, like this could be a game of the year. Like this could be a game we could be speaking about for a long time. But obviously in these conditions, sometimes teams can be nervy and everything else. There's a lot on the line. But yeah, no. Look. Hopefully conditions can hold off, and we'll have a bit of a cracker.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's going to be very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to fill in for yourself there.
Sorry, I'm all over the place this evening. No, go ahead if you want to speak, Matthew. Or
no, I was going to say, like Aaron mentioned, the wintry conditions there. It could have been game of the year without the wintry conditions, but there was those sort of conditions for Ballygunner against St. Martin's or St. Thomas's, and that was game of the year. What was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So you never know.
Absolutely. Well, if we're going to go with our predictions for this weekend, lads, Ballygunner versus St. Martin's to reach the All-Ireland final. Are we going to see Ballygunner making it to another All-Ireland final, their first one since 22, or are St. Martin's going to cause what would potentially be the biggest shock of the year? Although I wouldn't consider it a shock if they won this weekend, but just from the perspective of the expectations of Ballygunner. Matthew, Ballygunner, St. Martin's, who are you tossing it to?
But just to peep at the comments there, and I actually agree with most of them. The pressure is on Ballygunner for this game. Like when you look at the way they've put away their opposition in recent years, the way they've won their games. Obviously, they've only lost one game after normal time in the past 3 seasons. Like when you look at those figures and to have one All-Ireland title, it's not a very good stat to put up from a Ballygunner point of view. Whereas with Martins, they're under no pressure at all. No one's expecting anything out of them. And as well as that, with the Fina game and with the Ballyhale game, they relish the underdogs tag. I do agree with Peter as well in the comments. They need the first goal. If they get the first goal in the game, I think they could cause somewhat of a shock. I'd agree with you, Liam. I wouldn't consider it a total shock because Martins are a very good side. I'm going to say Ballygunner will edge it slightly, but it's going to be a very, very tight game to call. But I'd agree, the pressure is on Ballygunner this weekend. If they don't win this weekend, is this a failed generation of Ballygunner hurlers, do you think?
I wouldn't
say it's... Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a failed generation, but I certainly think it's a... What's the word? Like an underwhelming. Yeah. I think just from the perspective of, listen, winning, is it 4? They've won 4 Munsters in the last 10, 15 years, is it? Or have they won 5 now? I know they won the 3 in a row. They've won the one recently as well. So, and winning the 13 in a row in Waterford, winning an All-Ireland, it's still fantastic what they've done and what they could potentially still do over the next couple of years. But I just think if you're a team that's this dominant, I wouldn't think, I kind of in a way link it to sort of Tipperary throughout the 2010s. Okay, they won the All-Ireland in 10, 16 and 19. But I feel like they left some All-Irelands behind them. They left 2009 behind them. Could say they left 2011 behind them to a degree. They left 2014 behind them. Ballygunner kind of remind me of that. While they've won the provincial titles or whatever, won a few National League titles or whatever, they didn't win the big ones maybe as often as they probably should have. And that's probably my perspective of Ballygunner. But I don't know, Aaron, whether you agree with that or...
No, yeah, I wouldn't say they're like a failed generation of players or anything like that. I'd probably agree more with you, Liam. I think it's one of them where when you look at Tipperary in the 2010s, they probably should have been the team of the decade. You could argue maybe they still were. You can definitely still make that argument, but I don't think you can say it definitively. Do you know what I mean? With Kilkenny maybe, at the start, and obviously Limerick towards the end. But yeah, I definitely think, I think there will definitely be regrets there, if they don't get another one over the line, And look, I know there is young lads coming through, but with the Mahneys and maybe even Desi Hutchinson to a certain extent, they're not gonna be around forever. It's probably 2-3 more years. There's probably going to be a decline maybe with some of those players as well, and everything else. But yeah, no, I would agree as well. You'd look at that one against St. Thomas a couple of years ago when they lost that on penalties. That was very unlucky. You couldn't really kind of disagree with them, for losing that. That was just a little bit of an unlucky one. But there have been a few times I think they have let themselves down in big matches. But and look, if they were to lose this one, I think it would be a bitter pill to swallow, just given the fact that, you know, St. Martin's haven't been a team to get to this stage, you know, on a regular basis. So yeah, I think it would sting if they don't come through this.
Absolutely, definitely will. Well, Matthew's going with Ballygunner for this weekend. Aaron, you follow suit, or are we back in the Leinster boys?
Yeah, no, I think I'll go with a 3-point win for Ballygunner. I think it'll be one of them where, you know, it'll be tit for tat throughout the majority of the game. I think Martins will have stages where they lead, but I think it'll just probably be in the last 10 minutes where they'll pull away. Like, even I've mentioned it before, like Ballygunner against the Piercy, where they found another percentage to go up on for the last 10 minutes, and I think they'll do something similar here.
Interesting. Well, I'm going against the grade, and I'm actually going for a Martins victory this weekend. Yeah, I know I'm going to be laughed at on Monday morning. I know I am, but I'm going to be sticking my neck out there. Well, I'll let you have this weekend off from that perspective. No, I just have a weird feeling that we could be getting deja vu from last year with Sarsfields, or potentially with Thomas's from 2 years ago, only just without the penalty shootout. I just have a feeling like Martins are a real dogged team, and they never know when to give up, evidenced by Nafina, evidenced by Ballyhale Shamrocks. And I think I still, to this day, say that the way that Sarsfields bet Ballygunner last year is that they had a go at them, they ran at them, their work rate was absolutely off the charts, and on a damp, wet, miserable day as well, they got stuck in on a day that Ballygunner had absolutely no interest in doing that. And I just have a feeling if Martins can apply that this weekend, they might just about have enough. And they're riding the crest of a wave as well after winning a first Leinster championship. I'm telling you, if winning a first provincial, it can do things to you. We've seen over the last couple of years, but we'll just have to wait and see. So we're going to move on next then to the other All-Ireland semi-final, which is taking place this weekend between the Galway champions Loughrea and the Derry and Ulster champions Slaughtneil. I suppose, Matthew, this is the game that is least talked about between the two games, which is probably fair considering Ballygunner, their previous All-Ireland winner, St. Martin's, after the way they've won the Leinster Championship. For Loughrea, it's been a long time since the Galway final. I can't imagine they've gotten a load of maybe top-notch challenge matches in that time, considering a lot of the top clubs across the country would obviously be finished this time of the year. Maybe they played the NUIG team or the UL teams, or, you know, teams like that potentially, or something like that. But it has given them a chance to rest. It has given them a chance to see what Slaughtneil are like in the Ulster Championship. And they're probably going into this weekend as the favourites to beat Slaughtneil. But what way do you see this going?
Just on the thing you were saying there about it's been the less talked about, isn't it a bit weird? Because these two clubs were in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, Loughrea and Slaughtneil. Yeah. Loughrea losing obviously to Nafina, and Slaughtneil falling short to Sarves. So like both of these sides want to get to an All-Ireland final. Like they didn't get there last year. Obviously, both of them, I think, lost by a point as well. So it was just an agonising way to lose. I suppose for Loughrea, it's their second kind of rodeo at this in the last 2 years after winning the Galway Championship for the first time in a long while last year. For Slaughtneil, they've been at this rodeo for years now. Like, you almost feel sorry for this Slaughtneil team with the group of players that they have, like the likes of Brendan Rodgers, with Chris McKay back this year, Shane McGuigan. These sorts of players, yes, they've reached an All-Ireland final in football, and I'm sure they would have been proud of that. But they want to reach it in hurling as well. You've seen with the likes of Dunloy reaching the All-Ireland final in recent years from Antrim. You've seen the likes of, obviously, Lockheed Shamrocks winning All-Ireland titles, I think, in 2009. Like, you have these sorts of stories, and Slaughtneil want to be another Ulster story in that as well. I could see why it's the least talked about, considering both sides don't have maybe as much standout players as Martins or Ballygunner. Like, Martins obviously have the trio Connor brothers, and Ballygunner have sensational players all over the park. Loughrea, we'll break the scores now in a sec, but Loughrea, other than probably Tiernan Cúilín and possibly Anthony Burns, they don't have much firepower there, which could be a concern for them down the line. Slaughtneil, yes, they have firepower with the likes of Brendan Rodgers, his scoring tallies, the Chrissy McKaigs and all that. But the asterisk next to it, you look at the sides that they have been playing. They've been playing Derry sides, which they've dominated that championship for years now. And the Ulster Championship, you look at the game against St. John's in the Ulster final, did Slaughtneil get much of a test? I don't think so. They won the game by 13 points, and St. John's got a player to score 9 points out of their possible 10. So that wasn't really much of a test. I think St. John's only scored 2 or 3 points from play on the day as well. So that wasn't the test that Slaughtneil would have wanted. They go to the Portaferry, you could say, and one of the early games against Kevin Lynch's, Slaughtneil haven't really got a test either. So both sides are kind of getting under the radar in terms of tests and all that, in terms of getting ready for that Ireland semi-final. So it's a quite interesting game. Both sides will have to want, because both sides lost the Ireland semi-final last year. Would they have the quality to reach the final? I think there could be a few nerves, there could be a few jitters in this game. It could be a bit nervy. It's a very difficult game to call, though. I wouldn't say Loughrea are overwhelming favourites, considering the way Slaughtneil have reached all Ireland semi-finals in the past, but it should be a tight game.
Absolutely, it should be. I suppose looking at Loughrea's scores, first of all, like you alluded there to, Matthew, I mean, Tiernan Cúilín has been the real standout scorer for them this year. 42 points overall, with 29 of those points coming from placed balls, from frees, and 1 coming from a 65. So overall, he's got 12 points from play. You mentioned Anthony Burns, who was bursting, pardon the pun, onto the scene for Galway earlier this year. We remember the goal he got against Clare in the Alliance League as well, which I believe was also nominated as one of the goals of the year nominees for TG Gahar this year. You have Darren Shaughnessy as well, who's a very, very good player as well on his day. 3 goals and 9 points. Shane Morgan getting 17 points, with 15 of those coming from frees and 2 from 65s. Martin McManus with 210, etc. And the list goes on. And looking at their games, like you mentioned there, the Galway Championship, yeah, I mean, their first game out was a very competitive game. Crockwell, they've had a competitive game. And then kind of from there, Clarenbridge pushed them close enough. Turlockmore, only 5 points in it, which in hurling, to be fair, isn't much, but it still looks somewhat convincing. And then they had that brilliant victory over St. Thomas's in that Galway final for the second year in a row. They're the Galway hurling champions. I suppose, yeah, Aaron, that is the thing that would probably worry you from a Loughrea perspective, probably from a Slaughtneil perspective as well, which we'll get onto in a moment. But from a Loughrea perspective, I mean, when your top scorer is 42 points and then your next highest is 3-9, which is 18, it's a small bit of a concern, albeit they haven't played as many games as the rest of the teams that we've mentioned already. But Loughrea will probably want to need other players to step up this weekend, especially if Tiernan Cúilín frees aren't going well, or if he's not in form or whatever, because they're going to have one eye on him throughout this game.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's why it is interesting, because it is two teams who've been quite similar in that regard. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not a huge amount of scoring power. Like, we were looking at Ballygunner and going through, like some of the forward power that they have, and we're going through the O'Connors, scoring, mental amount of points really. And that's why I think it with Loughrea Slaughtneil, I think I think this weekend, if we had Loughrea versus Ballygunner, I think a lot of us would think Ballygunner would win it quite comfortably. I think the same if they were playing Slaughtneil and everything else. So that's why I think it is two very balanced games, which could potentially lean it to being a quite heavily favoured final. Depending on how this goes. But yeah, there isn't a huge amount of forward power there for Loughrea. Like, I do think Anthony Burns has probably been their best player this season. His forward power, explosiveness has been brilliant. And even you were highlighting that goal he scored against Clare. But yeah, I think defensively they've been strong as well in moments. They've been quite good in regards to that. But yeah, I would probably favour Loughrea at this moment in time, but it is there for Slaughtneil. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. We're looking at the Slaughtneil scores and their paths to the final as we speak. Shea Cassidy scoring 2 goals and 56 points, with 32 of those coming from frees and 3 points coming from 65s. So overall, he's got 2 goals and 21 points this season coming from play, which is still very, very impressive. You've Cormac O'Doherty, who's one of the finest hurlers in Ulster, and I would even say even in the country as well, to be honest with you. Very, very underrated player. 29 points this season, 16 coming from free, so 13 from play. Then you have Brendan Rodgers and Shane McGuiggins and Christy McHiggs, who are just some of the best dual players in the country, particularly Brendan Rodgers and Shane McGuigan. I mean, you look at that, 222 from play this season for Rodgers, 13 points for McGuigan. You have Shane McGuigan getting 5 points as well, and the list goes on from there. And then you look at their path to the final. I suppose, yeah, it is. You do look at the Derry Championship. They've won it so many times in a row. I believe it's 13 times in a row that they've won the Derry Championship now. And like you mentioned there, Matthew, I believe a few moments ago, Kevin Lynch has probably gave them their closest battle in the championship. You look at the rest of the games. I mean, 23-point wins, 11-point wins, 11-point win, and I believe that's a 20-point win in the county final if my maths is right. Like, it's, you would probably look at this and say that the Ulster semi-final against Portaferry was probably the only game that somewhat benefited them from a real competitiveness perspective, because I would agree with you. I don't think the Ulster final was anything special or anything like that. Look, it was tough on St. John's, obviously, if, being in the final or whatever, it was still a great achievement for them to be there. But they disposed of them very, very comfortably over the course of that 60 minutes, and it really wasn't a great game of hurling to watch. But as we saw last year with Slaughtneil, they pushed Sarsfields all the way in the All-Ireland semi-final, very, very nearly reached the All-Ireland final. Like, this is the fact that we nearly had Loughrea, Slaughtneil in the All-Ireland final last year, nearly 2 pucks of a ball from, we would have had a very different final last year compared to what we did have in the end. But it's probably no benefit in a way to Slaughtneil, probably similar enough to Ballygunner, that they've kind of been sweeping the Derry Championship away with relative ease. And then even in the Ulster Championship, their only real competitive game, you would say to a degree, was their semi-final. Does that help them this weekend?
To an extent, probably not. At the same time, you look at Loughrea's journey to the final, and funny enough, I know they've had a bit of a break from the Galway Championship compared to the provincial championships, but their games have been very, very competitive. Loughrea, 1 point win in the final, 5 point win in the semi-final, a point win in the quarter-final, even lost the game at the group stage to Crockwell. So, in fairness, Loughrea have been tested in the Galway Championship game in, game out. So that would benefit them in a way. For Slaughtneil, though, I think the benefit for them is not their championship run, absolutely not. Like, you look at the margins they've been putting up. I think the benefit that they have is experience in All-Ireland semi-finals, because they've been down this road so many times before. Let's not forget, they put it up to Ballygunner, I remember, in Parnell Park a few years ago. So they are capable of putting up to any team. Obviously, in the SARS game, play go into a different universe. If Mark McGuigan strikes that ball into the back of the net past Ben Graham, we would have been talking about Slaughtneil in an All-Ireland final instead of SARS. So they were so close last year. And yes, it was brilliant from my point of view, and SARS winning the game in the end. But look at Slaughtneil players. They were absolutely gutted last year. Like, Shane McGuigan was inconsolable. Brendan Rodgers couldn't, he's like, how many more times are we going to lose a semi-final? Cormac O'Doherty was the exact same. Like, you feel sorry for these players that have given so much to Slaughtneil down through the years. So, in a way, they probably, I don't think it's written in the stars in terms of getting to All-Ireland finals and winning All-Irelands. But at the same time, I think out of these two, Slaughtneil probably deserve an All-Ireland spot more than Loughrea, considering their performances over the last few years. I don't know what you think about that, but I think this Slaughtneil team had been down this road so many times before, and they just want to get over the line and get to an All-Ireland final. Like, it's amazing to think that I figured out over a few weeks ago that no Derry club has reached an All-Ireland hurling final at senior level, which is sensational, because Slaughtneil have been thereabouts for a number of seasons. Even Ballyhead Shamrocks had a tough against them. I remember Loughrea a few years ago. Like, they aren't an easy team to play at all. And I think with the game being on in Parnell Park, it might actually suit Loughrea though, because I think being in Leinster, it might suit the Galway players more than the Ulster players. Now, if this game was played in Kingspan, Breffni and Cavan, which I think probably should have been played there, I think it would have suited Slaughtneil more, because it's an Ulster venue and they'd be probably more used to it. But yeah, it's a very difficult game to call. But I think what benefits Slaughtneil is basically their semi-final experience, and the fact that Loughrea haven't got their semi-final experience under their belts. Just on Aaron's point about Anthony Burns being Loughrea's main player, he probably was last season. I don't think he has been this season, though. He got sent off in one of the Galway games I was reading during the week. He's only scored 3 goals and 7 points from play, which isn't really up to standard, I would say, considering Anthony's performances over the past year. So I would say probably Tiernan Cúilín is probably their best player from a Loughrea point of view, possibly Shane Morgan from centre-back. But yeah, it's an interesting game, but yeah, it's a very interesting one to call. Loughrea are probably the favourites in terms of quality, but I think Slaughtneil, in terms of their experience in semi-finals, might have the upper hand, but we'll have to wait and see again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm actually really looking forward to this game, and especially the fact that maybe to the degree that has gone somewhat under the radar, given the Ballygunner Martins game is on after it, I think this could be a really interesting, tight battle, and especially being in Parnell Park, it's a bit of a tight pitch as well. It will actually be proper winter hurling, I feel, and it might not be the highest scoring of games, but sometimes the most entertaining of games could be the ones where both teams are just absolutely dogging at it, going at it from the very, very start. And like Matthew was mentioning there, Aaron, it was one potential puck of a ball last year that denied Slaughtneil an appearance in an All-Ireland final. And for them, for a Derry club to be in the All-Ireland final, to try and go and win an All-Ireland title, like you mentioned there, we'd seen it with Dunloy over the years being in All-Ireland finals, Lockheed Shamrocks being in All-Ireland finals, etc. Royal Cushendall pushing far in the championship as well. For an Ulster team and a team from Derry to be getting to an All-Ireland final, the motivation will be absolutely off the charts this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think as well, like, yeah, I think it definitely could be a real dogfight. I think, you know, this game. I think like maybe with Ballygunner and Martins, like that'll be where the skill is on show and the class is on show and everything else. Where I think this one might be a bit more of a, you know, like an old-fashioned kind of slugfest. A little bit at times. There's obviously a huge amount on the line for either one of these two clubs. But yeah, no, I do agree with the point as well. Like Matthew was making about Slaughtneil. Like I think, you know, they've been in these semi-finals so many times. Obviously, with some of the players that they have, you know, they're not going to be around for forever. Maybe it does feel like now or never. Like maybe this might be their best opportunity potentially at getting to an All-Ireland final and potentially winning an All-Ireland. And yeah, like I'd probably shade it to Loughrea, you know, by the smallest of margins. And I think the main difference really is just the quality of opposition, in my opinion. I know Loughrea haven't played in a while, but look, there would have been A versus B games. There would have been challenge matches probably somewhere in there as well. I know obviously you can't prepare for the same intensity of an All-Ireland semi-final, but, you know, with Slaughtneil, I do agree as well. Like Portaferry, St. John's, probably the only two decent teams that they played. One of them, they beat them very, very comfortably in St. John's. Like, so, I have a funny feeling this could be a game where Loughrea probably start the better, start the sharper, and Slaughtneil are probably caught out a little bit by, you know, the skillfulness of this Loughrea side. I think Slaughtneil will pull it back towards the end of the second half, but I think Loughrea will just about do enough to hang on.
Interesting. Matthew, you concurring or we sliding it to the Derry opposition?
You know what? The thing is, maybe this is a bit of my heart talking. I think Slaughtneil will get over the line this weekend because simply they're all Ireland semi-final experience, and you can't go to the well so many times and end up at the losing side the same number of times. Like eventually the nut has to crack sometime, and I feel like it could crack this weekend. Possibly considering Loughrea's, I know they played in the final last year, but possibly their lack of experience in All-Ireland semi-finals. I'm going to slide it to Slaughtneil, but just about. But maybe it was just looking at those players last year and just feeling like, yeah, obviously you were delighted SARS got over the line, but I was looking at those players, the likes of McGuigan in particular, and I was thinking, when are they going to get to an All-Ireland final? When are they going to break that glass ceiling? I'm kind of hoping it's this weekend because those players deserve to play in Croke Park for their club, the service they've given over the last few years. So I'm going to go for Slaughtneil to win the game. Wouldn't be surprised if Loughrea do, but I think Slaughtneil might edge it.
Interesting. Well, Aaron, I've been on your side the last couple of weeks, but I'm actually going to be on Matthew's side this week. I do apologise. I have a feeling Slaughtneil are going to do it as well, and I just think mainly because I just think with Loughrea not having played for a long time, I don't think it benefits them at all. Yes, Slaughtneil's Ulster final wasn't the best of games, whatever, but it was still a championship match, whereas Loughrea, like challenge matches can only do so much for you. And as well, there is that side of it of, now look, I still think Loughrea showed great potential last year. They probably should have beaten the Fianna, to be honest with you, in that semi-final. They probably have huge regrets over that as well. But I have a feeling this game will actually go to extra time, but Slaughtneil might just have the fitness to get themselves over the line in the end, maybe a goal in extra time or something like that. So I'm going to go for Slaughtneil versus St. Martin's. final, which would be interesting. Well, no matter who gets to the final this weekend, it's going to be a very interesting final in a couple of weeks' time in Croke Park, but we'll just have to wait and see. So that's the All-Ireland semi-finals from the senior level wrapped up. There are other games that are taking place this weekend, as we know, in both the junior and the intermediate championship. We'll look at the intermediate first of all. We'll just give a quick word to these. Éireog Carrickmore of Tyrone are taking on Toreen of Mayo. That's in Kingspan Breffni Park at 2 p.m. this Sunday. And in the other game that's taking place in Laois Harrow Park at 2 p.m. Both these games, by the way, are on Sport TG Cahir as well. So shout out to them for showing these games as well. They're doing a great service all year for the club championship. Upper Church Drumbain are taking on, from Tipperary, are taking on Kilkenny's Danesfort. I suppose, Aaron, for Danesfort, I mean, the way they won the Leinster Championship, the way Richie Hogan just came off the bench when he probably wasn't even supposed to be there and won them the championship was absolutely terrific. But it's interesting as well, and I think it's brilliant to be seeing Tyrone versus Mayo in an All-Ireland hurling semi-final. Never thought I'd see the day. The two of them obviously famously playing an All-Ireland football final in 2021 when I think it was just confirmed that Mayo are just cursed forever, that they'll never win a football All-Ireland, to be honest with you. But Toreen are a team that have been on the up the last couple of years. They were beaten All-Ireland finalists a couple of years ago, just narrowly losing out to Monaghan in that All-Ireland final in Croke Park. And if they can get themselves to another All-Ireland final and go up against one of a Tipperary or a Kilkenny team, it could do so much good for Mayo hurling.
Yeah, absolutely, it could. Like we were kind of alluding to it earlier. Look, I think it's great, to be fair, to have a Tyrone team and a Mayo team in an All-Ireland semi-final. I know obviously it's not senior, but at the same time, it's great to see. And I think we want to see, counties rise in hurling. Mayo, Roscommon, Tyrone, Armagh, like all these counties, we want to see them kind of rise up. We've seen a little bit of in Leinster in recent seasons, Carlow, Kildare, these kind of teams kind of bursting up. And we want to see more of it, because ultimately we want to have the best, we want to have the best kind of sport and the best kind of competitive nature of the game that's possible. I wouldn't know a huge amount about the Tyrone champions, to be honest. Like I've seen a bit of terrain here and there, and obviously been following them over the last couple of years. I think Fergal Boland's involved, isn't he, with terrain? So they've got like a couple of Mayo footballers obviously involved there. And yeah, like I think look, it would be great to just have it's not often you probably have a Dublin man cheering for a Mayo representative, but I'd like to see them do it, to be fair, just mainly because I would like to see a bit of a, I wouldn't say a renaissance in hurling and Connacht, because it's probably never been there to begin with anyway. But it'd be nice to see the Mayo teams come up, the Roscommon teams come up, and maybe we could have a bit of a Connacht Club hurling championship. And then in terms of the other game, I do agree with I think Peter saying it there. Like Danesfort are looking very, very strong, and it's very hard to kind of look past them going into this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think Danesfort are looking fierce good at the moment. But at the same time, Upper Church Drumbain won a very competitive Munster championship as well. So they're definitely not a team to be sneered upon either. And looking at the junior championship, Matthew, I'll come to you with this, because there is a Cork interest in the semi-finals this weekend, with Kilbrittain of Cork taking on Davidstown Court Cuddy from Wexford. That game is taking place in Clonmel Commercials on Saturday at 1 p.m, also on Sport TG Cahir. And the other semi-final in the Junior Hurling Championship, again, Donegal versus Sligo. We absolutely love to see it. Burt from Donegal taking on Eastkey of Sligo from Father Tierney Park in Ballyshannon. That's at 1 p.m, also on Sport TG Cahir. Have you had a chance to see bits of Kilbrittain in Cork in the championship, or?
I have, Liam, without a doubt, because I watched their final against Glen Rover's second team, and they were very, very impressive in it. A lot of very good players. Obviously, they beat Kyle Rossity in the Munster final, who, just for context for our listeners, have Padraig Fitzgerald, a Waterford senior intercounty player who scored a lot in the National Hurling League. And Kilbrittain got a guy, James Hurley, to mark him out of the game, and they were absolutely exceptional. They beat them 217 to 9 points. It was a very, very good win. And normally, I would say Kilbrittain, they're a West Cork team. They're from Carbery. They're from my home patch, I would say. And West Cork hurling wouldn't be considered high in Cork. It'd be East Cork, Emo Kelly direction. It'd be North Cork, all them areas of Cork. But Kilbrittain have kind of torn up the scripts in many ways. They've beaten some good sides this season, the likes of Ballygunner, the likes of Glenrover's second team, and the likes of Knockderry from Limerick, and obviously Kyle Rossity in the Munster final from Waterford. They've beaten some very, very good sides, and they've proven what West Cork hurling can do if they put in the work. Like Kilbrittain have played 7 championship games. They've won every single one of them, which is a very, very good record. David Courtney, in comparison, I did a bit of research on them for a piece in the Southern Star this week, and I think they've lost a game in the Wexford Championship. They drew a game in the group stage. So what I would say, Kilbrittain have more of a winning mentality, I would say, than Davidstown, which is quite a positive there. Mark Hickey scored 1 goal and 56 points across the whole, including Cork and Munster, which is very, very impressive from him. He's been brilliant. Their captain might be a familiar name, Philip Wall. He's actually Jamie Wall's brother, and he's Kate Wall's twin. Kay Wall, who plays for the Bars, obviously, last weekend against Atton Rice. So he's from an esteemed family, and he's a very, very good player. Obviously, I interviewed him after the Cork final win over Glenrover's second team. And obviously, it was a very good interview in the Southern Star. I did another interview with Bertie Butler on the Star Sport podcast as well. And hopefully there'll be more interviews to come after Christmas with this Kilbrittain team. Like, they've been absolutely sensational. Joe Ryan's been brilliant in coaching this team as well. Obviously, they do have other great players, stand-up players and things like that as well. The likes of Ronan Crowley. Like, they do have some brilliant players. Josh O'Donovan, brilliant players all over the pitch. And hopefully they can get over the line. Like Davidstown have some decent players. David Dunn, a former Wexford inter-county hurler who won the Leinster Championship in 2019. He scored 8 goals and 10 points in the last 7 games. So that's very, very impressive from him. Experienced campaigner. You have some very good players. All Doyle's there, and Joe James and Porrick. You have Brian Smith, Oisin Hayes. So you have some decent players in the Davidstown Court and the Cuddy team, and they beat Barrow Rangers from Kilkenny, and Kilkenny clubs will be really strong in this grade in junior. So they are going pretty well, and they won the 3rd tier of Wexford Hurling, whereas Kilbrittain won the 5th tier of Cork Hurling. So there might be a bit of a gap there. But judging by Kilbrittain beating Waterford's 3rd tier champions in Kyle Rossity, I feel like they'll have enough for David. So I think and I hope Kilbrittain will get over the line this weekend. The best of luck to all the players involved and everybody involved there. And hopefully Kilbrittain can make it to the Holy Grail in Croke Park. Look at the other semi-final, Aiski against Burt. Obviously, Aiski do have experience. They reached the All-Ireland final a few years ago in junior, playing Ballygunner, coincidentally from Cork. They lost that game, but they do have the majority of the Sligo inter-county team, including Andy Kilcullen, who scored 7 goals and 81 points, I think. Yeah, 7 goals and 81 points for Sligo this season across Nicky Rackard and Lee this year, which is absolutely exceptional. He's a very, very good hurler. And let's be honest, if he was from any other county, any higher tier county than Sligo, he'd be talked about a lot more. He's a very, very good player. They do have the majority of the Sligo team. They've won the last 5 Connacht championships as well, so they're a very good side. And you look at Burt from Donegal, they lost the semi-final to, I think, Setanta in the senior championship in Donegal. Now, because Donegal has only 8 senior teams, I think only 8 hurling clubs in general, they're forced to have one of their senior championship teams to compete in the junior championship, which isn't any harm, I guess. But Burt are competing in it. They won the Ulster Championship. They won the All-Ireland quarterfinal against Thomas McCurtains from London as well. So they're under some very good form. Liam McKenny's a probably main player from them, a very good player from Donegal as well. I'd probably say Aiski will edge it because of like their experience at this level and obviously reaching All-Ireland finals before. We'll have to see what happens, but I'm just hoping all the best for Kilbrittain and hopefully they'll get to the All-Ireland final.
Absolutely. Well, we're wishing the very best of luck to all the players across the weekend in what is the final weekend of club games in the country for 2025. It's been a very emotional year for the club championship. It's been an emotional year in Gaelic games in general, and hopefully 2026 will bring much of the same excitement. So that's another episode wrapped up for Cúilín Media this evening before we all start getting delusional. That was around an hour and 10 minutes. We start usually going a bit bonkers. So my thanks to everyone who has tuned in this evening, everyone that's left comments and interacted with us. It really does help the channels. It really does help the show. So thanks a million to everyone who tuned in on this dull, wet Thursday evening, listening to us for the last hour and 8 minutes. Thanks to Matthew for tagging on. Thanks a million to Aaron as well. And thanks to Seamus for throwing in his comment. And hopefully he's having a wonderful evening in Dublin this evening. We'll be back Sunday night to look back on the games, the action from the weekend's games. But until then, enjoy the next couple of days and we'll see you again on Sunday evening.
Instinct, baby.